Good morning. This is Dr. Nettleman again, bringing you For Your Health. And today we're going to deal with a subject that we've dealt with a few times with the neurologists and specialists of basically dementia and Alzheimer's. I think many of the programs we've had before have been a little bit factual and more medically inclined. And I thought today I would bring someone that could tell us really what's going on out there from the patient and the family standpoint. I have the pleasure of introducing Christine Haden. And welcome, and thank you for showing here and bringing things to us. And we're talking about Alzheimer's, dementia. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your qualifications are, please.
My name is Christine Haden, and I've worked in senior living care for about 25 years. First as a licensed practical nurse in skilled settings, so I began my career there, and then began working for senior living, assisted living, and with main focus on memory care and Alzheimer's care. So that's what I do is I'm the National Director of Memory Care and Programming, and I support our communities who care for our residents who have Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and support their caregivers and their families.
Now, you mentioned the senior caring. This is part of Sunrise?
Yes, Sunrise Senior Living is an assisted living company. We have approximately 300 communities throughout the United States, Canada, and the UK. And we have independent living, we have assisted living, and we have our reminiscence program, which is memory care. And we care for folks who have Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and support their families as well.
And you've been, at least Sunrise has been in the foreground of many of the developments of this assisted living type?
Absolutely. For about 30 years, the founders, Paul and Terry Clausen, based their model of care and really founded assisted living in the United States, which was a new concept, a little bit different than skilled care. More of a social focus, and looking at the living experience of a resident, and also at the same time balancing out their care needs as well. So it was based on a Dutch concept that Paul and Terry Clausen were familiar with, as well as some of their own personal experiences in life of caring for. Terry cared for her mother at home, and they founded Sunrise over 30 years ago.
What do you consider as the most common warning signs that someone's parent or whatever is developing Alzheimer's?
It can be really difficult to try to figure out, is this normal aging, what I'm experiencing or my mom or dad is experiencing, or could this be Alzheimer's? I would say some of the most common symptoms that you could see early on are problems with memory, and the way we distinguish that between problems with memory with normal aging and something that might be symptomatic of Alzheimer's disease is when it begins to interfere with your daily life. So if my memory loss begins to affect my quality of living, then I probably have need to reach out to my physician. But it's memory loss, so it's things like retrieving words, forgetting names, forgetting important events, and even when you're reminded, not being able to remember that there was something that was going to occur. There are many changes that occur. Sometimes people begin to have difficulty with time and place. So, for instance, is my doctor's appointment today or is it tomorrow? And they begin to need to depend on others to remind them, which is all right. It's a form of coping, but it can be an indicator that things are, you need to look a little bit deeper into someone's situation. Visual perception changes. Sometimes people have difficulty judging distance and relationships of what they're seeing and interpreting. That's common early on. And people can begin to withdraw. That's what you'll see because they're not comfortable any longer in social settings. They can begin a conversation, might be able not be able to finish a conversation because they have difficulty with word retrieval. So you'll begin to see people withdraw and isolate, and that can even cause more confusion for somebody. So those are some of the most common ones. The Alzheimer's Association has 10 most common warning signs on their website, as well as Sunrise Senior Living has those as well. So if you'd like to learn more about it.
What might they be?
The ones I just mentioned.
Yeah.
So those are some of them. Just general confusion and not. One of the most common ones that I actually saw with my own mom and dad was the inability to do things that they always did. So it might be something like running an appliance or following a recipe. So you think there's difficulty with their appetite, but in truth, they're not able to any longer take the steps in a recipe through to putting something on the table that is good to enjoy as a meal. So maybe not being able to budget a checkbook or planning an event where those things were easier before. So those are some of the 10 most common symptoms that you'll see early on.
I think one example that you frequently hear is it's one thing to lose the key, but it's another thing if you don't really know what the key's for.
Exactly. And you can't go through retracing your steps like you and I would go through. If I can't remember where I parked my car, I can come out and I get that awful sinking feeling when I come out of the store, but I can retrace my steps. There are things that I can do, my brain allows me to do, to be successful in finding my car. But people with Alzheimer's disease can't go through that process of retracing their steps, so you begin to see that.
I'm sure you've been asked many times about the movie Still Alice, and I know you find here that a person who's very well qualified or above average intellect can compensate for a lot of these things.
Absolutely.
And that's fine. You can use computers and aids like that until you forget where the computer is.
Absolutely. And the energy, I think in my experience, what I see is a tremendous amount of energy that people cope with, that use to cope, is extraordinary. It's just extraordinary what their experience is and what they go through, all of those coping mechanisms.
How do you explain when we say Alzheimer's and dementia, are they really one and the same thing, or do you make a distinction here?
Well, when we train our caregivers, we make a distinction in saying that dementia, it's a larger umbrella. It describes a group of symptoms that we just talked about, some of them. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia.
Okay.
There are many different, and that's another reason to be aware of the symptoms early on, because there are a lot of other causes of some of those symptoms we just talked about, that some can be reversible. It's not all Alzheimer's. It can be depression. It can be medications. It can be all types of things that are causing your body to be imbalanced that can cause that dementia symptoms. So, but Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia that we see. So you're seeing a lot today. What's very interesting, a lot of mixed dementias. Years ago when I first started, everyone had the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, but now we're seeing people with mixed dementias. So you might have somebody that has what we call a vascular dementia as well as an Alzheimer's disease. So
this would be from blood vessel flow to the brain and light.
That's right. So and as we age, of course, we're living longer.
Do you remember when Alzheimer's was called pre-senile dementia?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I remember my own granddad. His diagnosis was senile dementia.
Right.
Yeah.
And they distinguish between senile dementia and pre-senile dementia.
Right.
I don't believe that distinction is made anymore.
No, I don't see that any longer. So what we are seeing, I would say in the last 5 years, is more of the mixed.
Yeah.
And I do think it's probably because we're living longer.
How can you explain the Alzheimer dementia to the children, the grandchildren? How do you approach this subject with them, and what words do you use?
I think the most important thing would be to plan for those conversations. So that's one thing. Plan for those conversations. And with any other topic with children, you want to answer the questions they're asking. So plan, but answer what they're asking, the questions that they're asking. And I would relate it to an illness. Maybe describe it in this way, that grandma or grandpa has an illness, just like you can have a cold, a sore throat, a headache, or some other type of illness. Older people, and I would make that distinction with them, sometimes have a disease called Alzheimer's disease, and it can affect their memory, and it also can make grandma or grandpa act differently. One of the reassuring things I think that children need to hear is that it's not their fault and they haven't done anything wrong, but that the person, their grandmother or grandfather, still needs their company and would enjoy their company. So whether it's just to sit with them, to be with them, to enjoy that time with them, is still very important to them.
Well, this is a difficult question, I'm sure, but let's say you have someone at home. At what point do you say you can't drive anymore? These these difficult things when the patient or the person feels that, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I mean, do you wait until they get lost the first time?
I First of all, I'd like people to know there are resources for you to reach out when you're in those situations. It's really important as a family member or a loved one to reach out to either the Alzheimer's Association. Again, we have a website that links into additional resources, Sunrise Senior Living. There are so many resources out there, so don't try to go it alone. The Alzheimer's Association actually has, I believe, a driving program that can be very helpful to answering those specific questions. In my own experience, it's important to, when you're dealing with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, particularly in a parent, when the roles reverse, it's it's not easy, but it's very difficult because you want things to be the way they were. And that's what you need sometimes. You need that mom or dad in your life, and it's really important to try to focus on, I believe, on what you're really dealing with and making decisions according to what's actually going on at that time. So if mom and dad are in danger of driving, or they're endangering someone else, the good decision, the solid decision to make is to find help that will begin to terminate that, their ability to drive. Whether, I know some people hide cars, or they have police officers speak to the person, or the physician, whoever the person trusts. But it's really important to focus on what's going on today.
And if you're going to keep the parent at home, you have to at least be assured that they're safe, that the environment is safe.
Absolutely. And that is something that has to be reassessed constantly as the disease progresses, as situations change. But you can set up a home for safety. Again, you'd want to reassess constantly. But things like chemicals. Chemicals can be very dangerous to somebody that's confused and has dementia. So you want to make sure those are locked and they're away. That appliances are not, aren't problematic or create a safety issue for people. Falls, you want to look at a home for scatter rugs and things like that, because again, visual perception begins to change, depth perception can change. So removing scatter rugs. So there's many things you can do to make a home safer, but that's a constant reassessment process. So particularly with wandering, because it becomes, that's something that you want to really protect the person from. So.
And a lot of these people were very susceptible to scams and things like that.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
that's part of the, the planning and solving problems. Um, People begin to be taken advantage of,
Yeah.
whether it's through donations or their money or balancing their checkbook or, yeah.
Mm. If one of the parents does start to develop these problems and doesn't recognize the child anymore, who's an adult really, how's the best way to communicate with the patient, with the end of the parent, the grandparent?
There's a couple of things that I could share with you that might be helpful. One is to really center yourself. That is very painful. That is very difficult. But what I want to give people is the hope that there's meaningful connection even at that stage of the disease process. So, because the person is different and can no longer communicate the way they always did, we believe the essence of the person is still there. They have all their human needs that we have. They need to feel safe. They need to feel secure. They need to feel like they belong. So that communication process at that stage of the disease, when they can no longer communicate with you or don't recognize you anymore, your place in that is probably even more important to the person, because they can no longer verbalize their needs. Or so I would say center. We teach our caregivers, our care managers, to quiet themselves, to center before you approach someone that you love that has a disease process, and just stop all the chatter and just be with that person in the moment. And the simpler, the better. And maybe it's just sitting with them, holding their hand, maybe having something really good to eat together.
Simple conversation.
Simple conversation, not challenging conversation. Maybe it's looking at pictures of babies or being outside in nature, or those can be such, saying prayers together, whatever was important to that person before, making that happen in the moment and being in that present moment. You can have really joyful moments still.
Very good. Now, as a caregiver, these individuals get very tired themselves, the caregivers, burned out. How do you deal with that?
That's very challenging. One thing you can do is to focus on the tremendous amount of compassion, your own, if you're the caregiver, focus on the tremendous amount of compassion and commitment that you're giving to this person that you love and care for, and draw strength from that. It can be very overwhelming, but I think the person needs to focus on the good that they're doing, the difference they're making in that person's life is huge, a huge contribution to that person. So focus on that, reach out to others. We at Sunrise have monthly support groups, Alzheimer's support groups. The Alzheimer's Association has lists of support groups so that you can connect with others experiencing the same thing and you do not feel alone. Feeling alone and isolated is just a terrible burden. Take care of yourself as much as you can. Stress hormones can cause you to become ill. So you need to take the caregiver. It's almost like a checking account. You got to take in more than you pay out. And that's really hard for caregivers. So consider things like respite care. And I would say build a network of people around you that are supportive and that understand. And reach out for help, ask for help. Those are some of the things.
Do the amount of support an individual gets from an Alzheimer's unit, if you go online, alzheimers.com, does it vary from geography to geography, from Boston to New York to St. Louis? I mean, if someone wanted to go online and get some kind of information or respite, is it that simple?
Yeah, well, the resources are there. That's the good news today. The resources, the information. The other thing is you want to educate yourself as much as you can about the disease process. But um, we have a website, Sunrise Senior Living, and then we have a memory care resource page, which has blogs on it. It has links to the Alzheimer's Association. It has a caregiver's guide that helps you with all these things that we're just talking about now. And then again, you can ask for information regarding respite care. The Alzheimer's Association also has the same information if you go online and look. They have caregivers resources. They have support groups. You can download informational packets. So the resources today are really there. But I would say the most important thing is the connection to other people that can be helpful to you is really important.
When I've had doctors on the program and we talked about it, they're just talking experimentally about the APO3 and 4 and the like, the genes, the genetic predisposition of developing Alzheimer's, and I believe that it was only less than 5% are genetically transmittable. But how can, if someone in the family, if you have someone in the family with Alzheimer's, is there anything that the children or grandchildren could do as they age to reduce the possibility that they may develop Alzheimer's as they get older?
There are some things that research is beginning to show that can have a positive impact. There isn't any guarantee for any of us, but healthy living lifestyle, so for instance, exercise, which makes sense because the more you exercise, you're getting blood flow to the brain. So exercise, staying fit, good nutrition, following a good diet, sleep. That's a lot. You see a lot today about the impact of sleep disruption in possibly, developing Alzheimer's disease. So making sure your life is balanced. And I would say that one of the key indicators is as you age is to stay socially connected. Make sure you have family and friends around and you keep those connections. People that isolate and withdraw, it can cause increased confusion. So those are some of the other interesting thing you can do, and it's kind of fun, is doing things you do every day in a new way. So if you drive to work on a certain route, drive a new route and try to grow some new neural pathways. There's some evidence that if we begin to challenge ourselves or continually challenge ourselves, it may have benefits. So.
Sort of using this muscle between our ears a little bit
right.
more, whether it be crossword puzzles
exactly. And
or reading.
Exactly. And
so you have to it's a difficult question, I know, and there are no real answers, but you want to exercise the brain.
Absolutely.
And I hate to see people tell me they're going to retire unless they have something to do that they enjoy and would keep them busy a couple days, 3 days a week.
Right, right.
But just to sit and vegetate.
No.
You're not using you're not making new pathways.
You're not.
You're not using the ones that you have.
Yeah, and you lose one of the hallmarks of the disease is people begin to lose their sense of meaning and purpose in life.
Yes.
And what you're just talking about builds purpose into your life.
Depression.
Yes.
And many of the people who have Alzheimer's are depressed.
They are. And
of course the question is, did the depression come first before the Alzheimer's, or did it come as a result of the Alzheimer's?
Right.
The jury's still out on that one.
It is. I'm sure I've seen many people in my own experiences once the depression is, aging, there's a lot of loss involved in aging. So sometimes people can get depressed, right. But I've seen people, once that depression lifts, their confusion lifts as well. Right. So.
And of course, treatment, we have a few drugs out there, and it may help.
Right.
There's nothing that's specific for Alzheimer's. I mean, if you take it, studies seem to suggest that less people over a period of time will have problems, but nothing specific.
Right, right.
There's nothing specific out there.
No.
Is there something unique to the Sunrise approach to the treatment or the care of the Alzheimer's patient?
We practice. I believe so. We very much practice validation therapy, which is a form of communication with somebody that has Alzheimer's disease. We teach and believe that behavior, what people call behavior, is really a communication of that human need. So we teach our caregivers to observe the resident and look at that behavior as a form of communication. What need are they communicating that we as a caregiver want to take care of? Is it when they're walking fast, for example, and pacing? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they cold? So we very much believe that the person is still there.
Yes.
And that we can meet their needs in a validating, empathetic way.
So you work around their needs, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And individualize as much as we can for the residents. So, because we're not all alike, and we don't become a collective they when we have Alzheimer's disease or any other disease. We're still that individual. So we try to serve them through programming, life enrichment programs. If someone, for instance, was a kindergarten teacher, then we make that part of their program, and maybe they are the ones that we make sure are in the intergenerational program, and we reminisce with them about them being teachers. So we bring that meaning and purpose back into their life.
Excellent. Well, our 30 minutes does use itself up, and I would like you very much to thank you. I'd like to thank you very much. You came here you live in Massachusetts, but you do a lot of traveling.
I do a lot of traveling for Sunrise.
Well,
yes.
I do appreciate Christine Haden, and I appreciate your coming on the program. I think you put this topic more on a level that can be understood by the people that are watching it, and not so focused on the medical approach. Well, but I thank you again.
Thank you.
And is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, just believe in those moments with the person,
yeah.
And believe in possibilities for connection. So.
Good. Thank you very much. This is Dr. Nettleman bringing you For Your Health. Take care.